Hey there, quick question. If a country is rich, like really rich, big shiny cities, powerful armies, famous brands, why does it still owe mountains of money? I mean, shouldn't rich countries be the ones with cash lying around in a sock drawer somewhere? Here's the weird part. The richest countries on Earth are also the most in debt. The United States, Japan, France, the UK. It's like finding out the guy driving a Ferrari also owes the bank money for his groceries. So what's going on? Let me introduce you to Bob. Bob is doing pretty well in life. He has a stable job, a house, good credit. The bank actually likes Bob. Now Bob could live debt-free. No loans, no credit cards, no mortgage. But Bob doesn't do that. Instead, Bob borrows. He takes a mortgage to buy a house instead of renting forever. He uses a loan to start a business instead of waiting 20 years to save the cash. He uses a credit card even though he could pay in cash. Why? Because borrowing lets Bob move faster. Debt for Bob isn't a sign of failure. It's a tool. Now take Bob and turn him into a country. That's basically what's happening. Rich countries aren't broke. They're creditworthy. Banks trust Bob. Investors trust rich countries. So when a rich country says, hey, can I borrow $1 trillion? The world doesn't panic. The world says, sure. When do you want it? But here's where it gets sneaky. Countries don't borrow from one giant evil villain bank. They borrow from millions of people, institutions, pension funds, banks, insurance companies, and other countries. When a government issues debt, it's basically saying, hey, I need money now. I'll pay you back later. And I'll throw in some interest. That's a government bond. And boring as bonds sound, people love them, especially when they come from rich countries. Because rich countries rarely disappear overnight. They collect taxes. They have economies. They have armies. They have central banks. In investor language, they're safe. So pension funds buy government debt. Retirement funds buy government debt. Other countries buy government debt. Even you might indirectly own some without knowing it. Now here's the part that really messes with your brain. Rich countries don't just borrow because they need to. They borrow because it's convenient. Imagine Bob again. Bob has $50,000 saved. He wants to buy a $300,000 house. He could empty his savings, sell investments, delay everything else in his life. Or he could borrow at a low interest rate, keep his savings invested, and spread the cost over 30 years. Bob chooses the second option. Not because he's desperate, but because it's efficient. Governments think the same way. They could raise taxes sharply every time they need money. But taxes are slow, unpopular, politically explosive. Debt is faster. Need to build roads? Borrow. Economic crisis? Borrow. Pandemic? Borrow a lot. Debt lets governments spend now and deal with the bill later, which sounds irresponsible until you remember something important. Governments don't have a natural lifespan. Bob will retire. Bob will age. Bob will eventually stop working. Countries don't. A country can roll over debt forever. Instead of paying everything off, it just issues new debt to pay old debt. It's like refinancing a loan, forever. As long as the economy keeps growing and people trust the country, this works. That's the key word, trust. Debt isn't really about money. It's about belief. People believe rich countries will keep functioning, keep taxing, keep producing, keep existing. So they keep lending. Now let's add one more twist. Most rich countries borrow in their own currency. This is huge. If Bob borrows dollars and earns dollars, life is simple. But if Bob borrows in a foreign currency, things get dangerous. Rich countries usually don't have that problem. They print the currency their debt is written in, which leads to the question everyone asks next. If they can print money, why borrow at all? Because printing money doesn't feel free. It causes inflation, and inflation is like inviting termites into your house. At first, nothing seems wrong. Then suddenly, everything is weaker. Borrowing spreads the pain over time. Printing concentrates it. So governments prefer debt. It's quieter, cleaner, politically safer. And here's the funniest part. Debt can actually help rich countries stay rich. When governments borrow, they inject money into the economy. That money pays workers, funds projects, keeps companies alive, stabilizes systems during crashes. In a weird way, debt acts like economic shock absorbers. Without it, recessions would be much harsher. So rich countries don't ask, can we eliminate debt? They ask, can we manage it? And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because debt is fine until people stop believing the story, until interest rates rise, until growth slows, until trust cracks. At that point, debt stops being a tool and starts becoming a problem. But here's the thing most people miss. The real danger isn't how much debt a country has. It's whether the country can keep people calm enough to keep lending. Because the moment lenders hesitate, the moment they ask, wait, will I really get paid back? Everything changes. And that's when rich countries suddenly stop looking rich at all. Because at the end of the day, debt isn't a number on a spreadsheet. It's a mood, it's confidence, it's vibes, it's whether people feel okay lending you money. Let's go back to Bob one last time. Bob's been borrowing responsibly for years, pays his bills, keeps his job. Life is stable. The bank doesn't even flinch when Bob asks for another loan. But then something changes. Bob loses his job. His income drops. He starts missing payments. Suddenly, the bank doesn't see responsible Bob anymore. They see risky Bob. Interest rates go up. Loan offers disappear. That same debt that used to help Bob now suffocates him. Countries work the same way. When a rich country is growing, stable, and boring, debt is easy. Investors barely think about it. They say, sure, take another trillion. You're good for it. But when growth slows, when politics get, when inflation spikes, when leaders start fighting instead of governing, that's when lenders lean back in their chairs. They squint at the numbers. They ask uncomfortable questions. And the moment doubt creeps in, borrowing gets expensive. Higher interest rates mean higher debt payments, which means less money for schools, less money for healthcare, less money for infrastructure. To cover that gap, governments often borrow more, which makes lenders even more nervous. And now you've entered the debt spiral everyone warns about. This is why some countries panic under debt while others shrug. It's not just the size of the debt, it's the story behind it. Rich countries usually have a good story. They say, yes, we owe a lot. But look at our economy. Look at our productivity. Look at our institutions. Look at our history. And investors nod along. Poorer or unstable countries don't get that luxury. They can have far less debt and still be seen as dangerous. Same numbers, different trust. That's why you'll hear things like, Japan has huge debt, but it's fine. Greece had smaller debt, but it collapsed. Because debt doesn't live in isolation. It lives inside politics, culture, demographics, growth, belief. Now here's the part that might surprise you. Governments don't secretly want zero debt. Zero debt means zero flexibility, no ability to react fast, no buffer during crises, no easy way to smooth out shocks. Debt is like a pressure valve. Used carefully, it keeps the system from exploding. Used carelessly, it is the explosion. And rich countries are constantly walking that tightrope. Borrow enough to grow, but not so much that people panic. Spend enough to stabilize, but not so much that inflation runs wild. Raise interest rates to fight inflation, but not so high that debt becomes unbearable. It's a balancing act with no pause button. And here's the uncomfortable truth no one likes to admit. A lot of modern prosperity is built on future promises. Promises that future taxpayers will pay, that future growth will happen, that future leaders won't mess things up. Debt is basically optimism written into law. When optimism fades, debt gets scary. When optimism is strong, debt feels normal. That's why rich countries can carry massive debt for decades and still function. They're not debt-free because debt isn't the goal. Stability is. Control is. Keeping the system believable is. And that's also why debates about government debt get so emotional. Because deep down, people aren't arguing about math. They're arguing about trust in the future. Do you believe the country will keep working? Do you believe institutions will hold? Do you believe growth will continue? If yes, debt feels manageable. If no, even small debt feels terrifying. So the next time you hear that a rich country owes trillions of dollars, don't imagine an empty bank account. Imagine a massive web of promises. Promises between governments, investors, workers, retirees, and future generations. As long as that web holds, the system keeps moving. When it tears, that's when things get messy. So, in conclusion, rich countries are always in debt not because they're failing, but because debt is how modern economies breathe. It lets governments move faster than taxes alone would allow. It spreads costs over time. It stabilizes crises. It funds growth. Debt becomes dangerous only when trust disappears. As long as people believe a country will keep producing, taxing, and functioning, they'll keep lending. And that belief, more than gold, more than cash, more than numbers, is what really keeps rich countries rich. If you want me to make other videos explaining these topics, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.